Thank you for joining me, John. Can you please let people know what you do and how long you've been working in the education sector for?
Hi, James, and thank you so much for inviting me to the interview and the conversation with Series for Education Estates. I've worked in the education sector for more than 10 years now in estates and construction management roles. So prior to that, my early career was spent as a management consultant working across all areas of public policy. And I then moved over in 2013 and spent 3 years as estates manager for a multi-academy trust in the West Midlands. So that was in the very early days of MAP development, and the idea of centralising functions such as estates, finance and HR was quite new in the sector back then, so it was a real insight in how to achieve it. Strategically, I did things such as implementing estates management software, compliance software across the 4 schools, and centralised the procurement of certain functions such as energy and other estates contracts. Operationally, I managed day-to-day estate staff, site staff, cleaners, catering staff, and that gave me the first-hand knowledge of their role in the day-to-day operation of the education estate. And then in 2016, I was approached by MAC Construction Consultants to develop the education sector for the business. So we're a construction consultancy, a surveying practice, and at the time it was a bit of a leap in the dark for a surveying practice to bring in someone from a non-surveying background to do this kind of role. But over time, we've demonstrated that business model works really well. Our school and academies value that level of strategic support, and 8 years later, I'm now a director of the business. We work with over 500 schools and academies all over the country. So I look after all the strategic and funding aspects of the role and support our clients with that, and our teams of surveyors in our local offices provide the technical expertise on condition surveys, feasibility studies, project procurement, project management, and also health and safety services on schemes that are live on site.
And how many people are in the education team working with you, and how many offices do you have across sort of England?
So we have 7 offices, 85 staff at the last count. And of those 85 staff, I would say at least 3/4 have some form of involvement with the education sector, and primarily schools and academies in some form.
Now, you mentioned sort of the sectors that MAC work in, and it kind of leads into the question that's been left with you by Stephen Long from Scottish Futures Trust. And Stephen asks, what sector experience would be best brought over to the learning estate to improve the delivery of the learning estate? So in essence, what can we learn from other sectors to really influence the learning estate going forward?
So we're a multidisciplinary practice, and leading on from your last point, our people work multidisciplinary and across different sectors. So in that way, they're able to transfer knowledge and best practice between those sectors. So one example is with the retail sector. We do a lot of work across retail for the major supermarkets and other types of retail. And one of the things there is those retailers have been at the forefront of net zero investment and have been for quite some time, and are able to implement that across their estate now. Of course, that's driven by the availability of finance. They're private sector businesses, but they were amongst the first to recognise the benefits of invest to save. So if you invest in things like LED lighting and other energy saving initiatives, particularly with an estate as large as some of the large retailers, then that offers those opportunities to save finance down the line. Now, obviously, Salix in the education sector has allowed the sector to take great strides in delivering that. But the lesson there is that the more upfront capital investment that can be provided, it can accelerate both the net zero and financial benefits for the education sector. We also work across the wider public sector, so I think that definitely offers learning opportunities, although many people see the education sector as being quite unique. There aren't many other sectors, for example, where we are now, where the estate's effectively shut for 6 weeks to allow those periods for maintenance, or in other sectors it isn't so traction heavy in terms of the numbers of users of the estate. So hundreds of young people coming through a school every day, passing through, causing the inevitable impact on the estate. But there are lessons to be learned from areas like healthcare. We've seen estates managers come in from those managing large government capital programmes, so they all bring something in terms of new approaches to estates management in the education sector. And then finally, I think this one's really important across all areas of the private and public sector. The T-level programme has been really transformational, as has the apprenticeship programme. So we have some real success with apprentices, but we've also delivered some really innovative projects to replicate real work environments in post-16 education for schools and colleges. So I think with the impact of AI and the need to deliver the skills that the economy demands, that's only going to become more prominent as we move forward in terms of developing the future leaders and preparing young people for the world of work by actually replicating those real work environments.
And kind of leading on from that question, I guess, is kind of what will be the main priorities for estates professionals working in the sector in the next sort of few months to year?
Yes, I think there's three key things here, James. Firstly, we just had a change of government, and I think responding to the inevitable changes that will be introduced over the coming months and years as a result of a change of government should be seen as a priority for professionals in the sector. One of the biggest pieces of advice that we give to our clients is that you should always be prepared for the next funding stream. An example of that is the new government has committed to developing 3,000 nurseries on primary school sites across the country. So that's inevitably going to require a degree of capital investment. So as and when that becomes clearer, those schools that have got a scheme that's designed or has got planning consent are in a far better position to access that funding than those that just apply when the funding's announced. I think the changes to the Academy Trust Financial Handbook announced in the past couple of weeks around estates management and the failure to ensure a well-maintained and safe estate being a rationale for the intervention of the notice to improve. I think that's going to be a key priority for Academy Trusts, and I think there's many tools out there to support with that. So the Good Estates Management for School Guidance and the associated toolkits. So I think reviewing the approach to estate management is going to become a real priority for many trusts moving forward because of that potential intervention by the DFE. And then finally, I think understanding your estate, it's a key aspect of GEMS. So whether it's compliance, condition, sufficiency data, capacity, decarbonisation opportunities, by having all that available data collated in one place, estates professionals will really be in a good place to respond to the changes and have the evidence to respond to those changes as and when they come about.
You work with a lot of schools and academies. So what conversations are you having in terms of their main challenges in delivering good estate management?
Yeah, so I think the obvious answer is funding and the availability and sufficiency of that funding, but there's also an issue around capacity within the sector. I think other people who've done these interviews have spoken to you about the challenges of recruitment and retention of estates professionals. That was a problem a decade ago when I worked in a multi-academy trust. We really struggled to recruit site staff back then. That problem remains. It's a key issue, but it's also quite complicated. So firstly, the smaller MATs, having a dedicated estates manager or estates professional might simply be unaffordable, and the skills are often not in place in-house to deliver those good estates management functions. So it becomes then an additional role for a business manager or another member of the senior management team or the senior operational team. Clients often talk to me about how good their site staff are in terms of going the extra mile, but there can be gaps in terms of compliance knowledge, their IT skills. That then results in a barrier to implementing systems to support good estates management or the overall broader strategic management or leadership skills. And then I think we need estates to become a viable career option for people, and estates management to be seen as an option in terms of their career, whether that's at site apprentice, assistant or manager levels, rising right up to estates or operations director roles. The DFE Estates Management Competency Framework is a really good starting point for that. And I think it should be integrated into recruitment and performance management for these roles to really address that recruitment and retention challenge and improve the overall outcomes for estates management for the sector.
I think going back to Stephen's question earlier, I think actually the education sector can learn a lot still from the healthcare sector. If you think of the scale and the magnitude of their estates and facilities and how they manage and deliver those on a daily and weekly basis, I think there's certainly more cross-sector learning that can happen to enrich estates and facilities professionals in the education sector. So thank you for those thoughts. In your opinion, sort of what do attendees get out of coming to an event such as Education Estates?
Yeah, so I was reflecting on this, having looked at some of the other interviews you've done, and I first attended Education Estates as a delegate in 2014 when I was really new to the education sector and my knowledge was nowhere near as well developed as it is a decade on. And at the time, one of the most important insights for me was the visibility and the availability of the DFE Capital team who presented on the Priority School Building Programme. I was new to the sector. I had estates responsibility for a school that was in a really poor condition at the time with some serious issues, and being new to the sector, the opportunity to hear from the DfE representatives and then speak to them on a one-to-one basis about the programme was really important. And on reflection, I think it was a really crucial aspect of the successful application we subsequently made to apply for the school building programme. A decade later, I've now got a stand at the event. I'm delivering a speaking slot with Joe Marchant, which I'm really looking forward to, and we're supporting his sponsorship of the awards, and that really demonstrates the journey I've been on personally since my first visit to the event. To summarise, I think there's three benefits. There's the opportunity to hear from expert speakers, to share that best practice and stimulate thought and discussion. Second, being able to network with others, whether it's peers from within the sector or with stakeholders from the DfE or other external organisations. And then finally, being able to discuss products and services with all the suppliers that attend the event, but without necessarily having that pressure of the hard sell, and just take some advice and ask some questions on the day. Final thing around education estates is that I talk a lot about moral purpose, and my colleagues will tell you this around. It's really important that everything we should do in the education sector, the core aim is to develop the education estate and make it better for children and young people. And I think education estates is a real opportunity for those at all levels to come together and share that knowledge to make that moral purpose a reality in their day-to-day work.
Thank you. And that's an amazing testimonial and your kind of experience and journey with the event as it's developed over the years. And the DfE will have a very strong presence again this year. We're shortly going to be announcing the content and speakers, and got some sort of really cool things they're going to be doing on the stand. So thank you, John, for those. You mentioned that you'll be speaking at the event. So can you give any insights as to what this will be about and what the audience can expect to hear from yourself and sort of Joe Marchant?
Over many conversations, Joe and I have discussed the various things that colleagues in the sector can do to raise the profile of the estates function, and we want to provide a real practical set of evidence, insights and tips to achieve this. And first of all, we hope as many delegates as possible can attend the session on the day. But in conversation with colleagues across the sector, one of the key conversations is often around, while education and the finance of the organisation is a real priority, estates can sometimes be a bit of an afterthought. So we really want to integrate estates and make it at the forefront of people's thinking in the sector to ensure that the estate is safe and well maintained and is a real contributor to delivering those educational outcomes and the moral purpose that I talked about earlier on. Of course, there'll always be schools that are in poor condition, delivering excellent educational outcomes and vice versa. And while education is obviously the core business, there is a real need to bring estates to the forefront of thinking within the sector. So the issues around RAAC have brought estate issues to the forefront. The DfE have brought in a number of interventions over previous years, the Capital Advisors Programme, the recent introduction of the Academy's Trust Financial Handbook, Notice to Improve intervention, which I talked about earlier. So I think all of those things together are going to start to raise the profile of estates, and we're going to cover those during the presentation to help stakeholders bring these issues to the forefront of thinking within their organisations.
A question I've asked every person so far on these sort of chats is, can you share something about yourself that the audience may not already know about you?
I was watching the interview with, I think it was Luke from I Am Compliant, and I think his answer to this was that he loves to talk and is a bit of an open book, and I tend to agree with that. Those who see me out and about on the conference circuit know that I love to have a chat, but I'm not sure how many people know this, but in our household we are Lego addicts. So we have a large and growing collection of Lego to the extent that it's almost taking over the house. We have buildings, vehicles. I've got a Sydney Opera House here in front of me. We have a world map on the wall. And for those that need a break from the day-to-day pressures of the estate's role, I can assure you that sitting down with a box of Lego for a few hours is really good for the mindfulness and getting away from the pressures of that day-to-day role.
Thank you, John, for joining me. As John said, they will be heavily supporting education estates in October. Do pop by and see John and his team on stand 520. They're also sponsoring the new Education Estates People's Awards, so do come along and celebrate the individual successes in the sector. And as he said, he's speaking with the fabulous Joe Marchant as well. So if you come to the conference and you've got a selection of conference sessions to go to, do go along to John. He's given a good plug of what they'll be speaking about and what you can learn. So John, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in October.
You're welcome, and thank you, and we look forward very much to the event in October. Thank you, James.